So you're going to have that am I failing, sinking feeling. So I think it's also setting the right expectations with yourself.
So I think that's the huge key to it. And I think to Daryl's point earlier of difference failing and being a failure usually is that. It is setting, realistic expectations. Sometimes, and talked about this quite a bit in the past, the Eastern philosophy has a much better grasp of this than the West does. Here in the U.S., we're very either you're a winner or you're a loser. It's just kind of how we view things. In Eastern philosophy is much more kind of going with the waves that, if you ended up here, that's where you're kind of meant to be. And, that's why you're there. Welcome to the Lionz Den, episode 30. Again, my name's Eddy.
And this is Daryl.
I'm Brad.
This is Alex.
So thank everybody for tuning in again. Again, please update, like, share.
Subscribe, tell your friends,
Comment.
your grandma,
That's right.
your aunties.
All of the above. So today we're going to be talking about something that's close to home for me. Am I failing? So it's one of those things that, I'm a big self-evaluator. I think we all are at this table. I know especially Daryl, all of us. Yeah. It's something we're constantly doing. I think anytime you're self-evaluating, those are questions you're going to ask yourself. So am I failing in my job, my marriage? And when I say failing, doesn't mean overall, like my job's a failure or marriage is a failure, but in this particular thing or this specific circumstance, whatever the case may be. It could be about this podcast. I mean, we have conversations all the time, constantly evaluating, what could we be doing better? Is the content good? Is the message we're sending good? If it is, why are we not getting the traction that maybe we'd like to see? I think anytime you want to be good at something, it's a question you have to honestly ask yourself. I think what I want to talk about today is how do you prevent getting too down the rabbit hole, which I can definitely am guilty of at times, especially when I'm pretty good if one thing is kind of not going the way I want it. If it starts piling up, I could definitely get lost in a little bit. And I think we're all guilty of that. I think everybody's guilty of that to a certain degree, but, I think it's important to look at, what does failing look like? What do you do when you're there? And kind of how that feels. So I don't know if you want to chime in, Daryl.
I like that question, am I failing? I've asked myself that several times in my life and will continue to ask myself that. Like you say, we do it with the podcast and just day-to-day things. I think that's a better question than have I failed? Because am I failing allows you to make those adjustments if you do deem that you are.
Agreed.
So it's something that you can climb out of, and it's a part of that self-reflection that we talked about on a few other episodes too. In the striving, the act of striving to make yourself better, or whatever you're doing better. So, am I failing is something that I'll always ask myself. It's something I tell my kids about, and as a way to keep yourself in check. To reach your goals. Because if you are striving for a goal to reach a certain goal, and you don't assess where you're at in that path, then you don't know whether you're being successful or moving towards success or failing. I relate that. A lot of stuff I relate to, like my military stuff. And like with ruck marches, a lot of our ruck marches, not a lot, all of them are timed. So throughout my ruck march, we had to do a 12-miler every quarter. And when we do that 12-mile ruck march, I know where I need to be at a certain point to determine, like, am I failing?
Right.
Now, once you get to, like, how we used to do it, we run most of it. So you're never really at that point where you're just running. But before that, if you just get up and you walk it at the same pace that you walk any other ruck march, you will start to fail if you don't track the time that you're going, because you're just going to naturally slow down, from exhaustion and stuff like that. And so asking yourself that is just a way to keep yourself in check and to keep being positive in what you're doing. So I really like the topic of this episode, because it's something that I do on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. Some people don't like to talk about failure, though. Like having past failures, or even if they will take offense if you tell them they're leading towards failure. Mm-hmm. You're about to lose this fight. Mm-hmm. And then they'll give up, because that means they're looking for that out, that reason to quit. Mm-hmm. So if they're looking for that, and you start assessing, are they already failing? It's a lot easier for that person who wants to quit once they realize that I'm closer to failure than I am to success. I may as well go ahead. I'm already there.
Right.
So it depends on your mindset, what type of person you are, whether that can be like whether you can take that question and use it to produce something more positive.
It's a question I ask myself all the time. I'm, self-employed. I have a small little business, and it is, over the years I've done it, there are times when I have said to myself, I have failed, and I've stopped doing what I do and gone to work for somebody else, tried a different career path, done other things. Inevitably, I always end up doing what I currently do. But I still constantly ask myself and second guess, am I failing? Is this working? Is it sustaining, despite,
all your efforts?
Yeah, tons of, good Google reviews and a large customer base. It's almost a daily question I ask myself. And it's, I've learned, though, because I've kind of been at that point, that weak point of just like, I'm just throwing in the towel. I've learned that it's good to ask that. It's good to assess, but powering through is a much better way to go than just kind of throwing in the towel. Mm-hmm. So.
Alex?
Yeah. Excuse me. For me, once I was a little bit better at being self-reflective, I was able to kind of gauge as I was getting closer towards being in that mindset you brought up in the initial question of, when you know it, how do you know it? How do you get out of it? For me, I can tell when my anxiety starts going crazy, when I start getting real anxious about stuff, not necessarily something in specific, but where I start to feel overwhelmed, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of like I'm in a puddle or a pond, and I feel like I'm just about to be at the point where I'm all the way underwater. I start kind of getting anxious, restless. So now I'm able to kind of take a step back and look and be like, okay, so what's going on? Is it something at home? Is it something at work? Is there some area where I feel like I'm not giving the effort needed in order to succeed? And then you asked a question at the end of it, how does it feel? So whether you know how to deal with it or it's coming, for me in my experiences, am I failing, whether that be in a relationship, at work, whatever the situation is, it always sucks. So this is, probably 20 some episodes ago, we talked about the middle, right? The ground of where you start to where you end up. Am I failing is a question that you ask yourself when you're not only at the beginning, but very heavily in the middle, and obviously once you're at the end. But it's kind of a self-check question, because you're looking at whatever you're trying to accomplish. Are you setting yourself too unrealistic of an expectation? That's going to cause you to have that sinking, failing feeling, because you're setting a goal and an expectation and you're putting an onus on it. I'll give you a quick example. When work was really, really, really stressful this year for me, it was a nightly routine to go for walks, right? Come home, go for a walk. And I remember the first time I was talking to Eddy about it. Well, first time was probably the 10th time. And you said to me, you're like, you better be careful, dude. It's just a walk. Ain't all that. And we didn't really have a chance to get into it more. And as we got closer and closer and we talked about it more, he was like, I don't know if you remember this conversation, you're putting so much onus on the walk that you're giving yourself an idea of what should happen on the walk, how it should make you feel, how long you should be gone, what the weather should be like. If any of those boxes aren't checked, your one thing that you're looking forward to is ruined. So you're going to have that am I failing, sinking feeling. So I think it's also setting the right expectations with yourself.
So I think that's the huge key to it. And I think to Daryl's point earlier of difference failing and being a failure usually is that, is setting, realistic expectations. Sometimes, and we've talked about this quite a bit in the past, the Eastern philosophy has a much better grasp of this than the West does. Here in the U.S., we're very either you're a winner or you're a loser. It's just kind of how we view things. In Eastern philosophy is much more kind of going with the waves that, if you ended up here, that's where you're kind of meant to be. And, that's why you're there. So there's something to be learned from every situation. I personally, having both, a background in both, I always try to juggle that, meditation, whatever it may be, fly fishing, camping, to kind of take that edge off. But I think for me, especially if you see yourself as a leader or you are a leader, you're just by position in your job, you're in a leadership role, whatever that may be. If you want to be a leader for people, that's something you always want to be aware of because people are looking at you for direction. So the last thing you want to do is be walking anybody off a cliff. You want to make sure that it's one thing to fail yourself. And I think for me personally, those are probably the most hurtful for me, is worried about failing somebody else. I could deal with failures. Not a big deal. Yeah. It happens. I know I'm not perfect. I know I'm going to make mistakes.
Right.
I know in your case, especially, Brad, you've expanded. So now you have more people, more mouths to feed, more people relying on you. For you, full platoon, same thing. We're in similar positions. We're in a leadership role. I remember it's real similar to Brad. So I've always, worked for people. And I had a situation where left a job, had a buddy, hey, let's go on a partnership, restaurant, and we'll do a restaurant and club. So we did it, and it was just complete car crash. And I just remember I'd brought in quite a few of the employees from the place I'd been at before. And I just remember like 14, 15 people looking at you like, is this going to get better? Did I make the best decision? A lot of people had left other jobs to come there, and, they're counting on you. And it's just a shitty, horrible freaking feeling. And I think it's real easy to get lost in that. I think that can happen a lot in relationships. You don't want to fail your partner. So you get lost in it, you get depressed, whatever. Can certainly happen in a job very easily, happen in friendships. I think a lot of people are driven that way. We just kind of talked about it, and we've all been there. I think the key with that is, to Daryl's point, is failing is much different than failure. And even within failure, it's going to inevitably happen. So, as much as that sucks and as much as that hurts, kind of what we were talking about in the past episode of that vulnerability, that being honest, if you have to on some level be able to accept that, especially in a leadership role, that there's going to be times that it just ain't going to work out the way you want. But I don't know what some things that you do, Daryl, to kind of get you over that where it doesn't get too dark.
I keep like my recreational stuff. I keep at the forefront. So I do a lot of recreation on my own. So like you asked one before, like I go camping locally. by myself on my off days, you know. And I'll go there and I won't do nothing. I'll fish, or I might not fish. I might just read a book at my campsite, in or outside of my tent. And one of the other guys we work with didn't understand like why I would just go camping locally. And I'm like, it's a part of my recreation. Like I get away, but I'm not too far away.
Right.
I have to, drive for hours. I like to do that when I can. But this one I can just go right around the way, and it takes me out of the hustle of where we live, and just separates me, and it adjusts my mood. It allows me to gather myself and regroup. And then with that, that's also where I'm asking that question of, am I failing at whatever it is? A background of mine is in marketing. And whenever and this is standard marketing, with anything you see that's being marketed to you, it comes in the form of a packet, whether it's McDonald's, whether it's a new grill, anything like that. The marketing structure is a packet, and in that packet they have a target audience that they're trying to reach. And then in that target audience that they're trying to reach, they have several products, commercials, publications. It could be flyers, anything. And what they have with those is they have a run date. So they can run them simultaneously. They can start them in sequence. But they all have that, are these ads, publications, whatever it is, are they failing? And at that, when they look at the feedback they're getting from it, they come up to what they classify as a decision point. And that decision point is, do we continue with this ad? Is it reaching the people that we intended for it to reach? And if they say, yes, it is, all right, is it enough for us to continue it? And then they determine, yes, we'll continue it. No, it's not. But it is reaching these people who are starting to buy whatever the product is. So do we keep it or do we adjust it? And they go from there. So having that background, I never really thought about it. I naturally took that into my life. Because I was doing it in another realm. Like, okay, I'm doing this. Am I getting out of it what I intended to get out of it? If the answer is yes, okay, do I want to adjust it at all or keep going? Am I not getting out of it what I intend to get out of it? What do I need to adjust? Or do I just need to scratch that all together and start anew? And that, having done it, it became natural for me. And that recreation part is when I'm in that decision making point, where I'm trying to decide which way I'm going to go. I'm at a crossroad, and it doesn't have to be a major crossroad. Be something minimal. I'm just going to determine how I'm going to go about my next steps. So I'm not walking without a plan or doing anything without any kind of form plan. So camping, the gym is recreation for me. Sometimes with my family, I can be in recreation mode, but it all depends because I have a big family. So if we get to in the conversation and doing stuff, I can't really, it's recreational, but I can't focus on like whatever plan I'm trying to come up with because now I'm interacting, so.
I think for me, like I kind of touched on you kind of have to go through failure to understand failure. So there's times when you kind of do that evaluation of whether it be work or relationship or whatever you're at, or it could be a project, like I like working on things. Sometimes things go off the rails. So I kind of have to go, you look on your past of like, well, in these times of my life, I jumped the gun on failure. If I would have stayed the course, I would have been better off. So I kind of use that now as almost like a benchmark. Okay, well, what's this look like? I'm at this essentially failure crossroads, we'll call it. It's not going exactly like I want it to go, but we're here. Can I stay the course? Almost like you said with the marketing thing. Do we stay the course? Are we gaining some traction? Or do I just write this off? The beauty is, I'm older, I'm wiser. I've had these past experiences where I can kind of look at them and be like, I can kind of call this situation quits, write it off as a failure. I'll be okay. I'll go do X, Y, and Z or shift gears or whatever. Or like, this is similar to this case when I did throw in the towel too early. I think I'm going to stay the course. So that's kind of when I'm self-evaluating, and it is a daily thing, and it could be the smallest of things. I'm a plumber by trade. My daily jobs, they go sideways all the time. And you have to make these, you know, I can't repair this. We need to fully replace it. Or I think I can repair this, but I'm going to have to get, you know, we're going to have to cut here, here, here. It's just this ever evolving kind of, as you're questioning yourself, and you just kind of learn. You build these tools as time goes on, and you know what, I can get through this. And sometimes it takes stepping away. I joke with people all the time, when it's problem solving, I solve it in my sleep. There's times where, you know, I'll step away from it. There are things like I like to do for recreation and boating and work on stuff. And sometimes those solutions come to you when you least expect it, when you're not staring at the problem head on. So those are the things. Those are kind of how I navigate that trajectory.
Yeah, I try to keep myself on track. I look at it kind of like, I mean, we've all been in the sales world. The three of us are still in it. And, you know, you and I are kind of in a place where we kind of have to manage that and manage a sales team. And I try to, you know, look at like myself mentally, things I want to achieve in the day, the week, that month, that year. And I try to give myself check-ins, you know, like it's like we talk about with our teams. And even when I was on the floor selling, you know, if you have a goal at the end of the month and you don't know how many days you have left in the month and how many bikes you're off and what you have to do in order to get back on track, it's hard, you know. And then when the end of the month creeps up, you got a lot of work to do. So I think with failure, it's the same thing with whatever it is you're trying to achieve, whether it be a mental status, some type of job, some type of achievement in your life. Are you giving yourself check-ins? How are you checking on your own progress? You know, what are some milestones? If I get to this point, I know I'm on track. How are you checking in with yourself? And I don't think there's really a blanket answer for that, because it really depends on what you think in your head that you're failing at or you have failed at. Right. If it's something mentally, what are you doing with yourself? You know, Daryl, I think that's a great point. You know, if it's something to keep yourself on track, how do you get away? You know, for you, it's recreation, right? Maybe different for somebody else, but that's a completely different method that you would use opposed to if you were trying to, you know, win the strongman competition. You know, maybe the recreation wouldn't be what you would do in that off time in order to achieve that goal, but you would have check-ins for something else. And I think we as people do this with everything, where we set expectations for ourselves as far as this is what we want to do, and we don't do anything to measure it. We just assume that because we feel like we've put the work in. I'm going to say that again. We feel like we've put the work in, that we earn it. When the reality is that the fact of the matter, you haven't earned it because you weren't able to achieve it. So what are you doing for yourself to motivate and also maintain a level of the ability to hold yourself accountable to achieve what you're trying to achieve?
So I think managing your expectation is really a huge part of this, and it is probably the most difficult part, especially when you're dealing with other people. You know, I found, I mean, been in management for a very long time. That's probably the biggest thing is expectation you put on other people. You know, we talk about it all the time. You know, I'm willing to do this or I'm willing to do that, and well, that person isn't. And you put that expectation, and if you consider yourself a leader, you know, I'm sure you ran into it all the time as a drill instructor. You know, well, my job is to motivate them so they should want to get there. And I think a lot of that is expectation of understanding that you're not going to do that for everybody. Mm-hmm. There's some people just not in their wheelhouse. There's some people, they just don't want it that bad. It's not that important to them. And I think when you judge yourself as a leader because of that, it can get real slippery real quick. Mm-hmm. Because, I'm failing. Because, you know, why couldn't I get this kid that weighs 80 pounds to lift 300 pounds? You know, because you're not managing a realistic expectation. Mm-hmm. You know, the hard part is setting that expectation. You know, I mean, that's the thing that I see the most, and it's probably most difficult for me, where I have to really stop and say, whoa, wait a second. You know, you've gotten to the points you've gotten in your life because you've been through certain things. Not everyone has been through that, so they may not see it that way. They may not view it that way. So how realistic was that expectation in the first place? A lot of times, for yourself, it's way different owning a business than when you're working for somebody. When you're working for somebody, the whole point of that is, well, if this doesn't work out, I could go somewhere else.
Sure.
When it's your shit, there is nowhere else. Right. This is my livelihood. This might be my house. Yeah. This is my this. This is my that. So, the urgency looks completely different. Yeah. And I got a good feel from that business. And for me, it wasn't a lot of money in it, but just being in it and failing was a terrible feeling. Right. Because you're just like, okay, I failed myself, failed these people that were relying on me, counting on me. I think a big key to this is you're going to have them. Yep. And for me personally, I completely know that. I don't really have so much of an issue with failing. It's more, I don't want to stay in something too long that's going to fail. I think that's probably what I struggle with the most. So if this road's going to lead me to failure, I want off that shit as quickly as possible. I think that's why, we're very self-evaluators, because, hey, if it's time to pull the pin, then I'm out. To your point earlier and what you were saying is, are you doing that? Can you do that too early? Or where that expectation was set too high, and had you stayed the course that you'd be there. I think that's the thing for me I probably struggle with the most, because I'm like, I'm okay with failing. I want to fail on, this small level. I don't want it to be a nuclear explosion fail.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think everybody would, right? That's the hard part, is if you had a crystal ball and you knew, if I stay on this road, if you were able to pull up your Apple Maps and say, oh, no, if I stay on this road, I got a detour, but I'm going to get where I'm going, you'd be able to be like, all right, screw it. The unknown is what's scary. You don't know if you're going to make it out the other side. And I think that's why so many people turn right before they even give it a chance. I think actually most people do that, kind of give up on it. And really, until you said it, until you've experienced failure, you don't know how to deal with or navigate failure. So unfortunately, the only way to do it is just to fail. One of these times you're just going to have to take that road until it dead ends and realize, well, these are the signs that, hey, it did say this was going to dead end. I probably should have turned off.
Right. So how do you think talking to people that you get them to not be so afraid of that failure?
Fear is the ultimate motivator for a lot of things. Obviously, failure being one of them. There are, like I said, there's times where I jump ship early, and that was just pure fear. It was like, I'm going to go, So I think if you can do, like to Daryl's point, if you can do things to maybe slow things down, go camping, do something that kind of just pulls you away, where you can, in a clear headspace, really evaluate that track you're on, whether it's a relationship or work or whatever the course is. If you feel like, I'm failing in this, take a moment back, do something you enjoy, and then kind of come back and revisit that, and then see where you're at. Don't maybe make that quick decision of, I gotta go now.
Right.
I think that would be my advice on that.
I think to get people to start thinking that way, you have to let them know that failure exists. And in my experience, you have to let them know that it exists constantly. So at selection, they tell you you're gonna fail repeatedly, every day, all day. This is this obstacle. Majority of you will not be able to negotiate it. Yes, I'm talking to you. And everybody's like, you're not talking to me. And they're like, yes, I'm talking to you. You will not be able to do it. And they don't know. They're just saying that because there are going to be some of you who can't do it. So I'm just letting you know. And then they'll demonstrate how to do it, and there's going to be a group of people who cannot do it. And they keep putting that into everything you do. This is the standard. You will not make it. Majority of you will not make it. Even with deployments, you deploying, majority of you will not come home the same way that everybody else does. So they just keep that failure as a real thing. One of the times I did push-ups for selection. When you go selection, everybody's doing push-ups when you do your PT test. And so I go up to do my push-ups. I count my push-ups in my head because I know I'm breaking the plane. I'm never worried about whether, because if you don't break the plane completely, or you do like a wobbly push-up, they don't count that repetition. So at selection, you need to max everything. So like 70 push-ups or something, 77 push-ups was 100%. You would just do 100 push-ups. Then you do 100 sit-ups. So I'm counting, and then they're distracting me from counting. So I'm doing my push-ups, and I'm counting in my head, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the guy next to me is just like 7, 8, 7, 8, 8, 8, 37, 47, 47, 47, 47. And now all I fucking know is 47. And I'm like, fuck am I doing wrong? So I slow down, and I start doing like strict push-ups because I'm like, I must have did like at least 20 wrong push-ups. And then at the end of it, he's like, yeah, you did 108 push-ups. Get out of my fucking line. Fucking with me the whole time, making me think I'm failing. But also showing me that I can fail. Because in my head at first, I'm like, there's no way. I'm about to go down here, I'm going to do 100 push-ups. I'm the man. Like, I'm going to do this. But he really broke me down because I really slowed down. Like, no, I'm going all the way down and all the way up. And then he had a counter behind his back. So he's counting them, just clicking them. Yeah. But what he's saying to me is throwing me off the entire time. So making that failure real to me made me like really not reconsider, like, oh my God, let me just quit. Let me see what I'm doing wrong. But don't quit. Keep going. I still got time. Keep going, but let me just adjust if it sounds like I need to make an adjustment.
Right.
At some point, you know. So that resonated with me afterwards. I mean, I was mad because I'm like, you fucking mess with me the entire time. Nobody had never done that. And then I understood it, though, you know, thinking about it later on. And then it just stuck with me from there. So making it real, making people know that you can fail. You most likely will fail. And it's not bad. It's not the end of the world.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I think the biggest way you can help people with or failure, or maybe the biggest way I've seen people hurt people when they see people going down a failure path is if you're somebody that's trying to help somebody, stay in your lane and don't go past what you're capable of doing. So like what I mean by that is I heard a story recently of somebody was talking about, a friend of mine was talking about a set of friends that they had, a relationship that was going on. One of them was in a real bad way and the other one had just got out of a real bad way and was kind of working through to the other side and kind of having a conversation about how dangerous that is, right? If you have somebody that's in a really, really bad place and somebody who's really not capable of really helping themselves, let alone help somebody else and giving guidance. I mean, we talked about it earlier. You can lead somebody right off of a metaphorical ledge, right? And I think it's knowing what you're capable of and how you're able to help somebody. You know, I've experienced this as I go through mental growth, you know, with myself, and I be able to understand things that I couldn't understand before. I have to kind of tone myself back when I see people looking for that advice, and I feel like I'm in a position where I can help. I have to make sure that what I'm saying, I know what I'm talking about, right? Because sometimes you go down the rabbit hole of being so confident because you've discovered something for yourself that somebody else asks you something and you're like, well, I'm the fucking shit. I mean, I got this figured out already. I could definitely help you with this. And then you give advice that could be detrimental to somebody, or you say something that's terrible, or you make somebody feel even worse because you have no idea what you're talking about. And because you just want to feel like you know everything, somebody's paying that price. So I would say, be honest with people. I mean, it just goes back to being a human being. If somebody's going through something and you see it, if you're not actually able to help it, that doesn't mean stand by and do nothing. It means either still have that conversation or maybe find somebody that can help, right? Help them find somebody that's able to give them that help. Just don't do nothing, right? If somebody's going through something that you're not able to help with, help them get the help. Yeah,
that's really good. Because if we figure out, one thing I like about our dynamic here is that no matter what, you're going to get forced perspectives. Because with humans, with people, there's never a specific answer.
Right.
You know, especially when you're dealing with anything that's internal. You know, so if I figured out what works to motivate me, doesn't mean it's going to motivate any one of you. It might. Right. You know, but it might not. It could be things that motivate me could be really detrimental to other people. Right. You know, because they never had like harsh criticism. And I'm not saying everybody needs harsh criticism, because it doesn't. Some people that does the complete opposite. You know, it tears them down. It doesn't make them want to continue. So from being a leader and being a father and being a coach, I never counseled all my soldiers or anybody that I had to counsel or mentor the same way.
Right.
I had like my group counselings that I would, be a certain way. But then when we get to that individual, I have to understand which personality I'm talking to.
Right.
Because I really do want them to take the information that I'm trying to give them. Mm-hmm. Not saying my way is the best way. I'm just saying this is what I noticed, and maybe this will work.
Right.
Sometimes you can motivate that person in that crowd.
Yeah.
But it's some of those people that you have to get individually, and then kind of tailor that information to them. So to your point, you can't be so excited that you figured out for yourself. Mm-hmm. You can be excited, but don't be as excited to share it with somebody. You can, but don't expect the same outcome.
Absolutely.
That's the key.
Because you might not get it.
100%.
Right.
And don't feel like if you don't get the same outcome, they did something wrong.
Right.
Or you're doing something wrong.
Or you're doing,
Exactly.
It's just the way, that's just what worked for you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And even like you said, we're all different. So like my view of if I'm going through something and in my head I'm like, I'm failing, I say that to somebody and they look at me and go, oh, but you have this and this and this and that. Like, what the hell are you talking about? What do you mean you're failing? So you have to put yourself in the context of the person,
For sure.
So it's all really good. Good point.
No, I mean, that's even for me, that's usually a big check and balance. Like when I'll kind of get lost in that, I take a look around and great friends, beautiful home, great stuff, like what's your problem, dude? Right. What else, what's the big motivator there? Because again, you can get lost in that.
Absolutely.
And the expectation and a lot of times really when it comes to people, like I said, for me personally, that's probably the hardest failures is feeling like, if I could have just did this one more thing for this person, if I could have said it this way, kind of to Daryl's point, constantly evaluating, man, I need to come from this direction. I needed to go right, and I went left with this person, and, I failed them. For me, that probably is the most difficult, because at this point in my life, most things I do are from a leadership position. So there's somebody counting on me or somebody looking to me or somebody relying on me, whatever the case may be, where, I'm always evaluating that because the last thing you want to do is hurt anybody else. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really, for me, I always have to go back to what are you really trying to achieve? So what makes it a failure or a success? And I really think, for me, I have to always ground myself with intention. Mm-hmm. So regardless if they made it through the finish line or didn't make it through the finish line, what was the intention?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So was the intention to finish the race? Was the intention for them to get healthier, to get better? So now the next time they might be able to do it, whatever the case may be. I usually try to get back to that God level of what are we here for? Mm-hmm. What did God create us for? What's our purpose? What's that intention? And the intention, if it's good, then there really is never a failure. Mm-hmm. If you had good intention, trying to do the right thing, trying to really help, you really can't fail with that.
No.
Mm-hmm. Things might not have went the way you want them to go, but that's not a failure. So let's say a relationship, you put all your energy in it, you put all your effort in it, relationship didn't work out, doesn't make you a failure in any way, shape, or form. It's just that wasn't the relationship for you.
Right.
Kind of going back to that Eastern philosophy of that puts you where you were supposed to be the next time. And
right.
to Alex's point, when you're lost in that middle, that's kind of where you lose that perspective.
Yep.
Because when you're on the end of it, you're like, oh, I see. Had I not hit that there and then went that wrong way there and this, and that, if I hadn't got lost, I would have never seen that beautiful stream that I just saw or that unbelievable park I was just at. You're like, holy shit, I'm lost.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what we talked about in that middle episode. Was that's the hard part? Is am I in the middle? Am I in the beginning? Am I in the end? Do I need to get the hell out? What the hell's going on? I think that's the part that's easy to get lost.
Well, and that's where faith comes in. So
You're 100% right.
I'm in the middle, I'm in the beginning, I'm in the end. You got to have the faith that
God's put me where I need to be.
God's put me where I need to be.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the answer of, so we just discussed all of this, of how do you navigate this, and there's really no real answer of in this situation. So it all comes down to that. So it all comes down to having, at least for me, I guess I should say for me, I know for you guys, it's been the faith that whatever it is I'm going through, the anxiety, the depression, if it's a good situation, a bad situation, I have the faith that, hey, just like the last 10 times I waded through the bullshit and I made it out the other side, I have the faith that I'm going to be here when it's all said and done. Perfect example, there's some changes going on at work, and a lot of changes going on at work, and my store affected directly. And, I thought to myself, could go one way, could go another way. And I just kind of sat back and thought to myself, bro, you've been doing this 7 years. You've been through some shitstorms. Whatever's coming, you can handle this. You got to have the faith that you can handle what's coming. You're going to be able to handle. And it's not necessarily even a bad thing. Just in general, when changes happen in your life, as you go through failure, you find that faith to pick yourself back up. When you're walking into a situation that could develop failure, it gets a lot less scarier. It doesn't feel like you're walking alone.
One of the things I want to interject too is that if you look at like creation, anytime you create something or anytime something was created, you have to go through those stages of what doesn't work.
Prototypes.
And those prototypes are not failures.
No.
Right.
They're actually they're steps that tell you what doesn't work.
Right.
So if you look at all the aircrafts before the Wright brothers came out with actual functional aircraft, those weren't failures. That was just junk that didn't work for what they were trying to do.
You know why you never saw what those were?
Yeah.
Because they didn't work.
Yes.
But there was a lot of them that they had to do.
They learned from that, though.
Exactly.
And then they eventually created something.
Yep.
Everybody that's created something has those steps, those prototypes to show you, okay, this doesn't work. I don't look at any relationships, my past relationships, as failed relationships. Those were prototypes for something else that I was learning
I
from
like
those.
it.
I was like, okay, so this plus this does not work. Like almost like a scientist.
Yeah,
Put that
absolutely.
in my little book. This plus this was not such a good thing. Don't do again. And then I know. So if I see it, I'm like, wait a second, go back to my pages. Yeah, that didn't work. Okay, so we're not going to do that. And with that mindset, that's why I'm like, I don't know if I have any failed relationships. I just had relationships that didn't work out.
They were just prototypes.
Prototypes.
That might be the new episode name for this one. Just is this a prototype? Am I in a prototype right now?
And I think to your point, and you mentioned at the very beginning, because you can get so lost in that failing that you're afraid to try that relationship. You're afraid to try that new job. You're afraid to try that new food. You're afraid to go to that new place because it's not going to work out. Blah blah blah, and not seeing it as that. And we certainly understand not everybody has that faith to know that God's put me exactly where I need to be, and that's okay. The other way of looking at it is this is the prototype.
Yeah.
This is the step to the next step to the next step. Now, where you're at in that, only time's going to reveal, but there really doesn't have to be a quote unquote failure.
Yeah, I think anybody that's on that edge of having that question of if the faith is going to help them with that, if you're going, so I'm petrified of skydiving right now only because I'm not in control. I shouldn't say I'm petrified. So I'm intrigued by it. So what scares me about it is I didn't pack my chute, right?
That's why I don't ride roller coasters or carnival rides.
So that's exactly why I don't do those. But I've also seen
jump
the people.
out of planes.
But I've seen the people that build the roller coasters.
Yeah.
I've seen the guys that jump out of planes for military. So it's a little different, right? For me, the thing that scares me is the parachute packing. Now, shame on me because I also want to do it because there's that rush. I want that adrenaline rush. And I'm sure it feels freeing. And I'm never going to know if the parachute was packed correctly unless I just jump out of the damn plane. So in this analogy with the faith, if you're at an end of, I don't know what to do next, just fucking jump. You're never going to know if the parachute's packed if you don't just jump.
I was at a point where my relationship was failing. Work was stagnant. The economy was rough. And I jumped, and I, that relationship was ending. I went to go work somewhere else. Our paths crossed almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And now look, I now am in the best relationship I've ever been in because I did the checklist. There was a lot of, that was bad, that was bad, that was bad. And now I'm in this great spot. But because of faith, you never really know. You can't be afraid to fail because sometimes in failing, a lot of good comes from it.
No doubt about it. And I would say if you're healthy about it and you're honest, real key word, being honest about it, I think nothing bad comes from it.
Right.
I mean, all it is a growth. It's a prototype. It's an opportunity to get better about it, smarter about it, be more aware and be closer to where you eventually want to be.
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody, for tuning in on this one, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.